Many people know that as soon as the gunshots stopped in Dealey Plaza, police officers and a throng of people immediately ran up the grassy knoll and behind the picket fence, where they looked for the shooters. Some of the people saw puffs of smoke and smelled gunpowder. The first police officers who reached the parking lot behind the fence were stopped by fake Secret Service agents, as they testified to both the FBI and before the Warren Commission. Spectators reported several instances of these fake agents taking film or pictures of the crime scene from them. The action of these fake agents is some of the best proof of conspiracy in the planning, execution, and cover-up of the president's assassination. What many forget, however, is that there is ample evidence of at least one other shot that came from in front of JFK's limousine. This shot may well have caused the first wound to the president that day, an entrance wound to the front of JFK's neck that we see him respond to in the famous Zapruder film. Unfortunately, there is also ample proof that plentiful evidence of this shot was also covered up, further confirming conspiracy in the murder.
The presidential limousine was there. Had been staying there for some time, just watching the back of the emergency room, when I realized that there was a bullet hole in the windshield. Talked to my friend next to me and said, "Look, there's a bullet hole in the windshield," and pointed it out to them. At the time, I did not know any of the details of the shooting. I was quite shocked when I looked up and saw the bullet hole, but it was very clear. It was a through and through bullet hole through the windshield of the car, from the front to the back.
Why did Secret Service not allow any Dallas authorities to examine the presidential limousine? No Dallas police or other law enforcement personnel were permitted access to study evidence of the number or directionality of the shots fired. Further, the Secret Service also overrode Dallas police requests and immediately removed the limousine from Parkland Hospital and flew it back to Washington, D.C.
Charles Taylor Jr., the Secret Service agent who had accompanied Samuel Kinney in driving the vehicle to the White House garage from Andrews Air Force Base, noted in his report that of particular significance, just left to center of the windshield was a small hole from which it appeared that bullet fragments had been removed. Nick Prunspy, a United States Police Park officer, also had an opportunity to take a look at the vehicle while it was in the White House garage. He noted that there was a small hole in the windshield, and based upon his many years of experience as a police officer, he noted that that hole had been caused by a bullet.
Like so much evidence in the JFK assassination, the same questions may be asked. If there was nothing to see, or if the evidence matched the Warren Commission's story of a lone nut shooter from behind, then why not show everyone that evidence right away? Why hide evidence? In the case of the limousine, we find the same obfuscation as in JFK's autopsy. Experts were not allowed to examine the number or the track of the bullets. Why? As researcher Doug Weldon discovered, the limousine front windshield cover-up went much deeper. He discovered evidence that the limousine was flown to the Ford manufacturing facility in Dearborn, Michigan, on Sunday night, November 24th, 2 days after the assassination, and a new windshield secretly installed the next day, Monday, November 25th.
There are several airports in the Detroit area. It would have been a simple matter to transport the limousine undercover to its final destination, the Ford Motor Company's Rouge plant. The late George Whitaker Sr., seen here with his wife, was a lifetime employee with Ford and held a managerial position at the Rouge plant. He went to work on the morning of November 25th to be confronted by an amazing sight.
He was astonished when he went to the B building where garage existed at that time, and he saw the Kennedy limousine that John F. Kennedy had been murdered in. The interior of the limousine had completely been stripped, and the windshield was not in the limousine. He went to the glass lab where he was in charge of laminating glass, and the glass lab door was locked. He knocked on the door, and it was open, and two of his subordinates were in there with the windshield that had been removed from the vehicle. They were under orders to take that windshield and use it as a template in making a new windshield. But what fascinated him, and which he discussed with his family and no one else until he spoke with me, was that he saw a hole in the windshield.
There was a good, clean bullet hole right straight through in the front. Right. This had a clean, round hole in the front and fragmentized in front of that.
So, of course, the next question is, why was the front-to-back hole not allowed to be examined by experts? Was it because it would have definitively proved multiple shooters in the assassination, and therefore proof of conspiracy? And if there was a front bullet hole, who, if anyone, did that bullet strike?
I observed in the lower third of the neck a small, rounded, well-demarcated entrance wound. This was obliterated by the tracheostomy in that Dr. Perry made the tracheostomy incision through the entrance wound. Different parts of the tissues were spread. He then made the incision into the trachea and through the hole that had previously been made by the entrance of the bullet, the tracheostomy was put in place.
Radio reports from Dallas that afternoon mentioned the small round wound of entry in the front of the president's neck. They were heard by the late Dr. Robert Livingston, who was then scientific director of the National Institute for Mental Health.
The reports had been that the president had been shot from the rear, from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. And the evidence at hand from the Parkland Hospital doctors of a small, neat wound in the neck was contradictory to that, or at least complementary to that, in the sense that it required that there be a shot from in front. And so I telephoned Bethesda Naval Hospital. The officer of the day I knew, and he put me quickly through to Dr. James Humes, who was going to head the autopsy team. He was very cordial, and we had a good conversation, brief. He had not heard about the neck wound. I told him that it was important because it was a wound of entrance, and I told him that it should be explored completely for its track and to find any bullet or fragments of bullets that would remain, and particularly emphasized that it had to be a frontal wound since there was no tearing of the tissues. He left the telephone momentarily and came back and said, "Dr. Livingston, I'm sorry I can't continue this conversation. The FBI won't let me."
Humes later claimed he only learnt about that bullet wound after the autopsy from one of the Dallas doctors. He never examined it.
I'm absolutely certain about that telephone call. I'm sure that Dr. Humes got a clear impression from me about the neck wound representing a wound of entrance.
So if Dr. Humes was not allowed to perform an autopsy to the best of his ability, especially if he were not allowed to examine the track of the bullet strikes, would that not indicate that intelligence service officials were complicit in the assassination cover-up? Who else would have had the power to control something as somber and important as a presidential autopsy after that president's murder? Dr. Humes will later admit that he destroyed not only his original autopsy notes, but also a second set of notes. He will offer his reason for the destruction of the original notes as not wanting some blood stains from the president present on the paper to survive.